shocking 10-year transformation, how a boy's cry for help changed a mafia boss forever. Tommy walked the cracked sidewalks of Newark, the sirens wailing in the distance feeling like a soundtrack to his existence, drowning out his thoughts. At 16, his world was stained with shades of grey, hopeless, gritty, and full of echoes that left no room for him. His classmates bullied him for being weak, fusing their laughter with the sound of slamming lockers. It was a burden that smothered him each day, yet that very day had been the worst, with bruises etched into his skin and a knot of anxiety coiling in his stomach. He felt like a ghost in a house of mirrors, endlessly reflecting his loneliness. Each evening, he sought refuge in the local library, a sanctuary of ink and paper. Here, surrounded by the whispers of long-forgotten stories, he found a flicker of hope. Yet tonight, the flicker seemed dimmer. He drifted toward the back, where Frank sat, an old retired police officer, misfit among the bound volumes. Frank's eyes, sharp with understanding, pierced through the defenses Tommy had built. "You know what, kid?" he asked in a gravelly tone. "You don't have to let them define who you are." Tommy's heart raced at the truth in those words. They rattled around in his mind, mingling with his fears. Did he truly have value? Did he deserve to be seen? As he considered, precarious shifts in his chest contorted emotions into a tight ball of frustration. The brutal realities of life gnawed at him like rust on metal, chipping away at his self-worth, leaving scars deeper than physical ones. But he wanted to believe. He wanted to fight against the tide washing over him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Outside the library, the shadows lengthened, darkening the streets that were so familiar to him, yet now felt suffocating. He bumped into Marco, a name whispered in fear across the neighborhood, the kind of name that could silence a room. Marco was the embodiment of power, yet Tommy caught a flicker of vulnerability behind the Mafia boss's hardened exterior. Were they so different, he wondered, both battling demons, ghosts haunting them relentlessly? As days turned to weeks, Tommy's laughter became a candle in the dark, sparking something in Marco, shaping their connection. Yet the further Tommy climbed toward self-acceptance, the tighter the noose grew around Marco's reality, enemies lurking just outside their fragile world. Each moment of joy, now shadowed by impending dread, left Tommy reeling. Was he creating a monster or transforming a man? As danger loomed, Marco's heart thudded with fear, not for himself but for Tommy, the fragile spark that could burn everything down. The stakes rose, whispers of betrayal echoing around them, baiting a trap that threatened to snap shut at any moment. Marco stood at a precipice, emotions tangled and raw, the weight of past choices pressing down like lead. Would he dare to protect Tommy, risking the very empire that defined him? As they faced the threats together, the air thickened with despair and uncertainty, hanging over them like thunderclouds ready to unleash chaos. Tommy yearned to be seen. Marco craved redemption, a paradox wrapped in a moment poised to unravel. Their destinies began to intertwine, but with each fragile heartbeat, the question loomed: would they survive the storm, or would darkness consume them both? Tommy's footsteps faded into the thrumming chaos of Newark, a rhythm of uncertainty that matched the drumbeat of his anxious heart. As he navigated the uneven concrete, the fear of the unknown danced at the edge of his mind, a constant reminder of the stakes weighing on him. Each encounter with Marco, each shared moment of laughter, built a precarious foundation, and he questioned whether it would withstand the storms brewing in the shadows. At school, Tommy remained a target, But as weeks passed, a subtle shift occurred within him. The laughter of his classmates now dripped with the poison of insecurities, but he began to absorb it differently, like water on a duck's back. He could rise above, he told himself. He visualized a barrier encasing him, erected brick by brick from the very words that sought to tear him down. Friendships that once felt unattainable now appeared within reach, blossoming amidst the decay of his earlier isolation. He sought solace in the library, a familiar refuge, where the scent of old pages offered both comfort and clarity. Frank greeted him, a sentinel of wisdom amidst the chaos. Surrounded by those tomes of bygone tales, Tommy shared his newfound resilience with Frank, recounting stories of standing taller against his tormentors. "It's not just about enduring," Frank replied, his voice steady as granite. "It's about learning to act. Strategy, kid. That's where power lies." Those words ignited a spark deep inside Tommy. He began to observe little things, subtle dynamics. He started to notice how his classmates interacted, the unspoken cues of dominance and submission. Curiosity shifted to determination as he made mental notes, developing an awareness that hinted at untapped potential. There was a smarter way to approach his struggles, a path that didn't rely solely on brute force or passive acceptance. He began devising his own strategies, using these insights not only for self-defense, but to form alliances. As days morphed into weeks, Tommy began to cultivate friendships, first with those who sympathized with his plight, and then branching out to unexpected corners. Embracing vulnerability, he shared parts of himself rarely revealed, and in turn, others reciprocated. Encouraged, he organized modest gatherings after school, inviting classmates to engage in unfettered conversation. Words were his armor now, forming an insistent growth in confidence that refused to be muted. Meanwhile, Marco observed this transformation, his heart torn between admiration and fear. Tommy's evolution cast a stark light on the shadows in Marco's own life, illuminating the dichotomy between their worlds. Marco wanted to shield him from the repercussions of association, but the boy moved freely, breaking barriers with a smile and a quick-witted response. Tommy's laughter echoed through the cracked walls of the neighborhood, and inexplicably, Marco found himself laughing along. Yet each smile also convulsed with apprehension. There was a cost to this bond, and the threats encroaching on their existence grew more menacing by the day. Whispers from enemies piqued Marco's instincts. It was a palpable tension gnawing at him, at one moment a proud protector and another a looming spectre that maybe he was the very obstacle to Tommy's enlightenment. "Can I truly be the shield?" Marco pondered one evening, staring into the depths of his glass, "against the tide of darkness I brought upon myself?" Sensing the storm brewing within Marco, Tommy made a critical decision. It was time for a confrontation, an open dialogue with Marco on the inferno surrounding them both. The clock ticked ominously, the pressure closing in. Tommy could feel the air growing heavy, fraught with anticipation and unspoken truths. It was a defining moment. Could he stand ground and vocalize not only his fears, but sow seeds of change? As they prepared to face the vulnerabilities together, the echo of unanswered questions loomed. Would he be able to push through the internal barriers they both encased themselves in? Or would they find themselves swallowed whole by the darkness threatening to engulf their fragile connection? Tommy's heart raced as he approached Marco's usual spot under the flickering streetlight. The soft rustle of the wind seemed to whisper around them, echoes of both hope and fear dancing through the air. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus on the conversation that loomed ahead, aware of the fragile thread connecting them. "Marco," he started, his voice steadier than he felt, "we need to talk." The urgency in his tone pierced the veil of silence between them. Marco's eyes, clouded with tension, fixed on Tommy, waiting for the gravity of unspoken words to unfold. "What's up?" Marco tried to deflect, but his posture gave him away. He shifted anxiously, the weight of responsibility evident in the furrows etching his brow. Tommy exhaled, the air heavy with determination. I can feel it. The fear, the danger. It's all around us, like a dark cloud. He met Marco's gaze, his resolve hardening. But we can't let it consume us. I won't be another victim, and I refuse to watch you drown in this. The moment hung in the air, each word sharp and deliberate, letting the magnitude of their reality sink in. Marco's fingers clenched around the edge of the bench, a futile anchor amid a rising tide. You act like you're the only one in danger, Marco shot back, his voice tight with suppressed frustration. I pulled you into my chaos. You could just walk away. Walk away? Tommy dared to challenge, resolute. I've already made my choice by standing here. You're not just my friend, Marco. You're part of my life now. Sharing that means we have to face the darkness together. Marco's expression flickered. The pride in Tommy's voice resonated, stirring a familiar mix of admiration and trepidation. It reminded him of everything he had once been, hopeful, fearless, and innocent. Torn between the responsibility of his own past and the potential of their friendship, Marco felt conflicting pressures, unraveling his loyalty. I don't want you involved in this world, he mumbled, looking away. But that's exactly it, Tommy pressed, his tone unyielding. The connection we share is our greatest strength. I refuse to let your problems define my worth. We can dodge this if we're smart and united. Together, we can create a new path. The challenge in Tommy's voice ignited something deep within Marco. A surge of gratitude mingled with frustration washed over him. He wanted to surrender to Tommy's vision, to the idea that they could chart a course against the impending storm, but his instincts warned him of dangers hidden beneath the surface. What if your methods don't work? What if they come after you because of me? Marco asked, the vulnerability in his tone exposing the cracks in his bravado. Tommy's resolve wavered briefly. He had always been the pursuer of strength, but could he truly protect someone who carried so much weight? An unfamiliar pulse of fear flashed through him, but he swallowed hard. Then we fight back, he replied, a flicker of conviction sparking once more in his chest. You've taught me to stand. Together, we'll learn how to fight smart. We won't let our past define who we are. We'll dictate our own terms. At that moment, Marco felt a glimmer of hope, offsetting his tempest of worries. Perhaps Tommy was right. Perhaps in joining forces, they could shift the balance of power, redefine their narrative. With a silent acknowledgement, a sense of unity emerged between them. An unspoken agreement hung like fragile threads in the air. Marco needed to let go of the fear that clutched him tight. All right, Marco finally relented, uncertainty still lining his words. But if we're doing this, we have to be prepared. We need a plan and no distractions. Deal, Tommy replied, the thrill of purpose igniting within him. We'll figure out our next moves together. Yet as they began to unfold new possibilities, the flickering light overhead crackled ominously. In the shadows, figures lurked, threats that loomed larger with each passing moment. Unbeknownst to them, a choice lay ahead, teetering on the precipice of change. The time had come to face the encroaching darkness, and as they took a step into the unknown, they felt the cold breath of danger on their necks. Would knowledge of their resolve be enough to safeguard what they had built? Or would they unearth a consequence far more devastating than either could imagine? Tommy's hands clenched into fists as they stepped away from the flickering light, the chill in the air mirroring the turmoil surging through him. Every step was laden with the weight of uncharted territory and unresolved emotions, igniting a fire within him, a call to take control of his fate. He needed to shift from passive observer to active participant. First things first, Tommy asserted, shaking off the remnants of uncertainty. We need to research what we're dealing with. Names, faces, everything. Information is our best weapon. Marco nodded, but his apprehension surfaced again. And then what? We confront them. You can't just waltz in there thinking we can resolve this with bravado. Tommy's determination flickered in his eyes. We set our terms. We're not going to let this dictate our lives. As they turned towards the park entrance, the night deepened, wrapping them in thick shadows. Tommy realized he had to adopt a different mindset. He couldn't just rely on adrenaline. He needed strategy. He recalled the countless hours spent studying chess with his father, learning how to anticipate an opponent's moves while protecting one's own king. Let's start with my dad's old contacts. I'm sure someone can help us find the information we need, he said, shifting gears mentally. The realization that he could tap into his past to forge a path forward sparked a new sense of empowerment in him. In the days that followed, Tommy became relentless in his pursuit of knowledge. They created a makeshift workspace in his apartment, cluttering the table with printed articles, newspaper clippings, and notes scribbled in frantic hands. As they pieced together the puzzle, a picture of the looming threat emerged. The syndicate that had shadowed Marco's life was even larger and more menacing than Tommy had initially thought.
"What about this guy here?" Marco said, pointing to a grainy photo of a man with cold eyes and a menacing grin. "He's one of the top guys, someone who doesn't take kindly to threats or challenges." Tommy's heart raced. "We need to know how he operates. Every leader has weaknesses. That's our leverage."
As they delved into the details, Tommy felt a level of focus he had never experienced before. Reality had demanded they rise from the ashes of their fears and confront the darkness that loomed. They began to train. Self-defense lessons, strategic discussions behind closed doors, and rigorous planning sessions that often stretched long into the night. But each confrontation with the cold, hard facts also brought the stark reality of what they were up against. Tommy would find himself staring into the mirror, questioning his own sense of identity. This was not just about Marco anymore. It was about who he was becoming. The boy who once hesitated at the thought of confrontation was evolving into someone willing to fight back against overwhelming odds. Yet there were moments when doubt threatened to creep back in. After a long night of research and discussions, Marco sat on the couch, his face drawn. What if we're just making things worse? What if pushing back against this only brings more danger? Maybe, Tommy responded earnestly, but we were already in danger. This time we're fighting back. We aren't alone. The gravity of their situation settled heavily between them, but so did a sense of purpose. Tommy's resolve solidified. He wasn't just pushing back for himself, he was doing it for Marco too. The weight of their intertwined fates would drive them toward the edge of confrontation, where one choice could determine their survival. As they continued to refine their plan, unknown shadows watched from a distance, aware of the simmering fire ignited within the two young men. The rising tension was palpable. The time to face their adversaries was creeping closer with every passing day, and Tommy could all but feel the consequences of their actions hanging like a storm cloud over them. "Tomorrow we hit the streets, find out who's friendly and who's not," Tommy said, all too aware that each piece of information could make or break them. They were on the precipice of a confrontation that had the potential to change everything. But was he truly prepared for the shift in his own identity that awaited? The following day held the promise of new revelations, and as they braced themselves, Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was about to break, revealing their true strengths and weaknesses in an unforgiving light. Would this venture into the depths of his new reality embolden him, or would it unravel the power he had finally grasped? Tommy stepped out of his apartment, the morning light filtering through the city's grime as a stark contrast to the darkness that loomed within him. Each breath was sharp with purpose, a continual reminder of the storm that awaited. Today would mark their first real attempt to gather information on those who threatened their world, and Tommy felt the weight of that mission pressed down on his shoulders. Stick to the plan, he muttered to himself, though he could feel the twinge of anxiety clawing at his insides. This wasn't just a mission, it was a test of who he was becoming. Would he emerge as a creator of change, or would he crumble under the pressure? Marco waited for him outside, his expression a mix of determination and trepidation. Tommy met his gaze, confident but aware of the fragile line they were treading. Remember what we discussed. We're here to listen, learn, and act cautiously. No heroics. As they navigated the busy streets, Tommy focused on the bustling environment. People brushed past them, each a reflection of their own struggles, hopes, and fears. He felt a disconnection. While others chased mundane routines, they were on a path laced with danger and shadows. "Check out that cafe up ahead," Marco said, nodding towards a gathering of unsavory characters. "I heard they've been moving some unusual goods." Tommy felt a tension coil in his gut. This was a different world, one that he had only seen glimmers of until now. "Stay close," he instructed as they entered the cafe. The murmur of conversation died momentarily as wary eyes turned towards the duo. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Tommy instinctively straightened his posture, channeling the assertiveness he was learning to embody. They took a seat in the corner, positioning themselves so they could observe without drawing attention. As they sipped their coffees, Tommy forced himself to listen. Subtle words and gestures emerged, snippets of conversation which hinted at larger operations and deeper connections. Yet beneath the surface chatter, an undercurrent of fear was palpable. He wasn't merely a bystander, he was beginning to piece together strategies. "Did you hear that?" Marco hissed, jerking his head towards a trio discussing a shipment. "They mentioned—" "Keep it down," Tommy hushed, feeling the tightening grip of uncertainty. He had to assess the situation carefully. Each word exchanged held weight, and mistakes could lead to disastrous consequences. Suddenly, a man strode into the cafe with a swagger that spoke volumes. He was clearly someone of influence. Tommy's instincts tingled. He knew they had to be careful. This was not just recent intel. This was a test of their entire operation and, more importantly, their resolve. "What's our next move?" Marco asked quietly, his eyes darting between the man and Tommy. "Let's see how this plays out." "We need more information before we engage," Tommy replied, but even he felt the tension rising within him. He was transforming, yes, but he was still on unsteady ground, teetering between caution and impulsivity. As the moments ticked by, he could feel his heart rate quicken. Each beat echoed the growing awareness of a deeper purpose within him, something he had hardly embraced until now. What had started as mere survival was evolving into a mission fueled by a sense of justice, his own kind of justice. After what felt like an eternity, they slipped out of the cafe, the words of the conversation still swirling in Tommy's mind. "We need to follow up on those leads," he said with newfound confidence. "I had my doubts, but this could really mean something," Marco admitted, the fire in Tommy's eyes reflecting in his. They were no longer just boys in over their heads. They were becoming active participants in a chess game that was heftily weighted against them. "Let's build our network. Reach out to people who won't back down, who know how to navigate this world," Tommy suggested, feeling the excitement of developing a strategy that was now fully his own. As they walked further into the city, every step resonated with purpose, but as the sun dipped below the skyline, he couldn't shake a chilling thought. Was he crossing lines he might never be able to uncross? The unfolding dangers lurked in the corners of his mind, waiting for the moment to pounce, and as the shadows grew, an even deeper confrontation loomed ahead. The time for hesitation was gone. Soon they would face someone formidable, the man from the cafe. Would he emerge from confrontation stronger, or would crossing that line shatter the identity he was desperately trying to build? Tommy and Marco traversed the dim streets, the chill of dusk settling in like an unwelcome blanket. With every step, determination battled against uncertainty within Tommy. The day's events swirled in his thoughts. The cafe, the conversations, the man whose presence seemed to command the room. This encounter could define their future. "Do you think we should go back? Maybe try to talk to that guy," Marco suggested, his voice tentative as they turned down a darker alley. The question hung heavy, stirring the doubts Tommy had been suppressing. "What do we know about him?" Tommy countered, recalling the man's easy confidence and the way others shrank back in his presence. "We can't just approach someone like that without a plan. It's an invitation to danger. But every moment we wait is a moment he's still out there. What if he's involved in something worse?" Marco's insistence weighed on Tommy. He could sense the urgency threading through Marco's words, a mix of fear and the fervent need for action. Tommy stopped, planting his feet firmly on the cracked pavement. "We need to think strategically, not impulsively. We're still gathering intel, remember? We draw attention to ourselves too soon, and it could cost us everything." He tried to anchor his voice in resolve, but doubt flickered at the edges of his confidence. "We're betting against odds stacked so high, Tommy. We can't afford to be passive," Marco replied, frustration creeping into his tone. As they reached the less populated outskirts of the city, Tommy took a moment to breathe deeply. An internal struggle raged. He wanted to act, to prove himself, yet he knew that recklessness would undermine everything they hoped to achieve. "Let's find a spot to lay low for a bit," Tommy proposed. "We can think this through." Marco reluctantly nodded. They found a secluded bench hidden beneath flickering streetlights. The surrounding shadows felt strangely comforting. Tommy pulled out his phone, ready to take notes on their findings, but his mind wandered. His thoughts oscillated between responsibility and the temptation of immediate action. "What do you think makes someone like that?" he finally asked, breaking the silence. "That man in the cafe. How does one become so powerful?" "It's all about fear and influence," Marco replied. "He knows how to play people. It's a game of manipulation." "And we need to learn how to play too," Tommy whispered, his thoughts crystallizing. They were not merely observing anymore. They were on the cusp of stepping into the arena. In that moment, a spark ignited within Tommy. The fear he felt wasn't paralyzing. It was a cue for growth. He pulled out his notebook and began jotting down potential connections, names he had overheard. Each note transformed uncertainty into tangible steps. "We could reach out to the bar owner," Tommy suggested, recalling a name dropped in the cafe. "He might know more about that man. It's a risk, but it could lead us to more intel," Marco finished, a glint of enthusiasm emerging. Now fueled with purpose, Tommy felt the stirrings of leadership awaken within him. "Tomorrow, we track him down. If we can navigate our way into that circle, we can start to weave our story into theirs." Yet a new heaviness settled on him. This journey was veering closer to a point of no return. The stakes grew higher. He realized each move he made could ensnare him further into a world where forgiveness was a luxury few expected to receive. "Are we ready for this?" Marco asked, a hint of fear creeping back. "Ready or not, we're in this now." Tommy knew the road ahead was fraught with peril, but each challenge shaped who he was becoming. With the night deepening its shadows around them, Tommy felt an unsettling thrill, the thrill of change, of transformation into something new, yet completely uncharted. The thought of confronting the man from the cafe loomed over him like a storm cloud, imminent and powerful. As they stood to leave, Tommy caught a glimpse of a figure watching them from across the street, shrouded in darkness. Something tightened in his chest. The confrontation was no longer a mere possibility. It was fast becoming their reality. "Let's go. We'll stake out tomorrow," he said, blending reluctance with determination. With the weight of anticipation pressing down, Tommy realized this was only the beginning of a much more profound journey. Would he become the architect of change he yearned to be, or would he lose himself in the darkness he sought to combat? The answers waited just out of reach, ready to unfold. "Tomorrow promises to be interesting," Tommy muttered, eyes narrowing at the shadowed figure, sensing the challenge ahead. It would be a defining moment, a confrontation that would force him to measure his courage against the evils they were challenging. The morning light filtered through the slits of Tommy's blinds, casting sharp lines across his room, but he felt no comfort in their warmth. The events of the previous night clung to him like fog, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation reverberating in his chest. Today was the day they would reach out to the bar owner, a step further into the enigmatic world they had only glimpsed. He stared into the reflection of his face in the mirror, a hint of resolve creeping back, fighting against the fear that had nestled in the corners of his mind. Tommy was no longer the passive observer. He was an active participant in a game whose rules were unfamiliar and dangerous. "Time to step up," he muttered to himself, his voice steadying as he dressed in the same clothes as yesterday, the fabric still carrying remnants of what he had endured. Scruffy and disoriented, he felt the need for a clean slate, a transformation that could reinvent him, or so he hoped. When he met Marco at the cafe, both were hushed by an urgency thicker than steam curling from their cups. "You ready for this?" Marco's fidgeting hands betrayed a deeper fear despite the bravado in his voice. "Ready enough," Tommy replied, flaring his nostrils as he took in the familiar scent of the place. "We've plotted our course, now we have to see it through." Marco eyed him, a mix of admiration and concern dancing in his gaze. Tommy could sense the weight Marco was placing on him, perhaps even a silent hope that he could be the catalyst for their change. Could he really become the leader they both desperately needed? With a deep breath, they set off toward the bar. Each step felt like a march into a war zone, a preamble to a confrontation that could either elevate them or shatter everything they had worked for. The city unveiled itself, layers of noise and chaos complicating their focus as they approached the bar front, a rough exterior that belied the connections hidden within its walls. Inside, they found the bar owner leaning on the counter, cleaning a glass. He looked up at their entry, and for an instant, curiosity flickered across his face. "Can I help you guys?" Tommy squared his shoulders and approached, his heart pounding a steady rhythm. "We need to talk about someone, a man who was here yesterday." "Maybe you should start by telling me who you are first," the owner replied, eyeing them skeptically. Tommy hesitated, grappling with the need to establish credibility in a world that thrived on intimidation and deception. "I'm Tommy, and this is Marco. We have information that could benefit you." "Information? What do you think you know?" The bar owner leaned back, crossing his arms, an unyielding wall that removed any glimmer of hope that their intentions were welcomed. He could feel Marco shifting next to him, unease rippling through the air. Tommy pushed forward, plastering determination on his face. "We're interested in the man who was here last night. We believe he's involved in something dangerous, and we want to stop it." A thunderous laugh interrupted him. "Stop it. You two are fresh off the street if you think you can intervene in that man's world. But if you want to play games, you'd better be ready for the stakes." Tommy felt the ground beneath him shift. This was not an invitation but a challenge. The very air in the bar thickened with the tension of hidden threats. Was he willing to risk everything? The stakes were no longer a mere concept. They were alive, thrumming at the foundation of his resolve. "Look," Marco interjected, sensing the slight falter in Tommy's demeanor. "We're here because we're tired of watching things spiral out of control. We need to know what's really happening." Tommy could see the flicker of interest spark within the bar owner's calculating gaze. Beneath intimidation lay the slivers of a different game, the game of negotiation, one that would demand every ounce of courage he could muster. "Meet me back here tonight," the owner finally said, the tone threaded with caution mixed with intrigue. "But know this, boys, crossing that man isn't just a joke, it's a war, and it looks like you're already knee-deep in it." As they left, the bar door closing behind them felt like sealing a pact with the unknown that would tether them impossibly to danger. Guilt gnawed at Tommy, mixing with an electrifying anticipation. He was stepping into a territory far from the safety of anonymity. "Is this really what we signed up for?" Marco whispered as they walked. "Whether we signed up or not," Tommy replied, a blend of excitement and dread engulfing him. "We don't have a choice. The time has come to face the powers that be." Behind him, the shadow of the cafe loomed larger, a reminder of the confrontation that had ignited this journey. Would he rise as a leader or fall prey to the abyss swirling beneath his feet? As day shifted in color, Tommy felt every nerve in him pulse with the weight of an uncertain fate. The truth awaited, its revelation shrouded in a veil of perilous decisions, a moment that could redefine him entirely. Tommy paced in the dim light of his apartment, the weight of the bar owner's words replaying in his mind like a broken record. The question flickered in his consciousness. Was he truly prepared for the impending war? This was no mere venture. It was a battle that demanded strategy, courage, and possibly betrayal. He felt the resolve building within him, a boiling mixture of anticipation and trepidation as he envisioned what awaited him that night. As the sun surrendered to twilight, Tommy began his mental rehearsal of the impending confrontation. He practiced articulating his thoughts, crafting arguments that could win the bar owner's trust without revealing too much. He needed to tread carefully, lest he invite a disaster that could crush him and Marco before they even had a chance to rise. "You're not in this for glory," he reminded himself, echoing the grounded practicality that his father had instilled in him. "You're in this to stop the chaos, to protect the innocent lives being toyed with in this underworld." Marco arrived at the door right on cue, eyes wide with a mix of anxiety and determination. "You ready for this?" The once familiar casualness in his voice was replaced with urgency, as if they were entering a battle rather than a straightforward conversation. "Ready enough," Tommy replied, though he could feel the knot tightening in his stomach. They both knew they were stepping into territory that could tear apart their lives or bind them together in uncharted ways. As they made their way back to the bar, Tommy's mind began assessing their surroundings, shifting to survival mode. Every person they passed on the street could be an ally or an enemy. It was a paradigm shift. He realized the game was not only about the immediate stakes, but also how deeply they could integrate themselves into this new reality. "Stick close," he whispered to Marco once they neared the entrance. The door creaked ominously as they stepped inside, where the air was thick with the pungent scent of spilled liquor and secrets. The bar owner was once again polished by flickering neon lights, a king surveying his domain. "Back so soon?" He leaned forward, his interest piqued but still laced with skepticism. "We were thinking about what you said," Tommy started, forcing himself to hold steady under the scrutiny of the bar owner's gaze. "We're not here to play games. We're serious about helping, or at least understanding what's happening." The owner raised an eyebrow, testing the sincerity in Tommy's voice. "Most people would choose to walk away. What makes you different? What will you bring to the table?" Tommy's instincts kicked in, producing a vision of the tangled web they sought to unravel. "We have information. It might not be much, but it's enough to spark a shift. This isn't just business for us. This is about ending the cycle of fear that's suffocating lives." Silence filled the space, thick enough to press against Tommy's chest. He could sense Marco's hopeful anticipation beside him. But would it be enough to prove their worth? Finally, the bar owner took a long, measured breath. "Information is just as dangerous as weaponry in this line of work. If you're willing to risk everything, then maybe there's potential here. But remember, commitment doesn't come without consequences. Are you ready to face them?" Tommy exchanged a look with Marco, a silent conversation filled with desperation and determination. This was it. They were either taking a monumental step forward or inviting chaos into their lives. "We're ready," Tommy declared, conviction sharpening his voice. The bar owner considered them, then chuckled softly, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Ready? That's quite the bold declaration for two kids still wet behind the ears. Let's see how long you can swim before you sink." The tension in the air fractured, and as they spoke, the gravity of their decision settled like a cloak of resolve upon Tommy's shoulders. The night was still young, but it felt pivotal. As they turned to leave, the bar owner called out, "Remember, boys, you're delving into a world where trust is scarce and loyalty often fades. Keep your eyes open." Outside, the enveloping night seemed to pulse with danger and opportunity. They were no longer just two boys caught in the web of violence. They were players in a much larger game, one that could challenge every facet of their beliefs and moral compass. "Do you think we can do this?" Marco asked, his voice barely above a murmur. "Honestly," Tommy replied, the truth weighing heavily in his throat, "I don't know, but we've already come this far. We owe it to ourselves to find out." They stepped forward together, the ghost of hesitation lurking behind them. With each stride, Tommy felt layers of uncertainty peel away, replaced by a fragile yet binding determination. The question remained, what depths would they have to plummet into, and would they emerge unscathed, or would it consume them whole? At that moment, a siren rang out in the distance, a stark reminder that chaos never rested. As they ventured deeper into the night, Tommy realized that they were on the cusp of a revelation, one that could either dismantle or reinforce the very foundation of who they were becoming. The air was thick with tension as Tommy helped Marco cross the street, their steps instinctively quickening in the shadow of the bar's flickering neon. Doubt clung to Tommy like a second skin. He wasn't just stepping into a world of danger. He was teetering on the edge, diving into an abyss where moral compasses twisted and humanity blurred. "Stick close," he repeated, though the words felt more like an incantation against the unknown, unraveling the courage he'd tried so hard to build. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses echoed from the bar, masking the chaos that lurked just beneath the surface. Inside, familiar faces blurred as Tommy and Marco approached the bar owner again. Tonight, it was no longer a parley into the unknown. It felt like an audition for a part neither of them was truly prepared to play. Before they could speak, the owner fixed an assessing gaze on them, drawing a slow inhale as he leaned back against the bar, a silent challenge lingering in the air. "Did you bring anything worthwhile?" His tone was sharp, yet laced with something akin to curiosity, as if he were testing an unrefined wine. Tommy hesitated, the weight of expectation pressing down on him. They had done their homework, piecing together rumors and fragmented conversations, but would it be enough to satisfy the man who dictated the rules of this perilous game? He caught Marco's eye, an unspoken agreement ripe with urgency, and took a steadying breath. "We understand there's a deal going down tomorrow night," he began, striving to capture the owner's attention with clarity and focus. "A shipment, something big. We thought you might want a head start." The owner narrowed his gaze, intrigued yet skeptical. "And what do you expect in return? Information like that comes at a price, boys." Tommy felt his heart rate escalate. This wasn't merely a transaction, it was a test of loyalty and intent. His mind raced as he articulated their worth. "We want to help you disrupt it. Imagine control over the supply, leverage over your competitors. We can be instrumental." He was walking a tightrope, adrenaline coursing through his veins as realization hit. He was not just bartering for information, he was offering a glimpse at their potential as allies rather than insignificant players. The ownership of their choices felt intoxicating, despite the risks that rolled like waves in his gut. The bar owner chuckled, the laughter edged with a hint of respect. "You either have guts or you're as foolish as you look. Let's say I entertain this alliance of ours. What's in it for you two, besides the thrill of playing king in a lion's den?" As he spoke, Tommy felt the gravity of their impending choices tighten around him. What were they truly risking? Their lives, their morality, or something bigger? A transformation of who they could become in this tangled web. "Success breeds power, and power opens doors," Marco interjected, surprising Tommy with the boldness of his words. "We're tired of living in fear. If you give us a chance, we can put ourselves in a position where we can act and change what's happening around us." Tommy turned to Marco, a mixture of admiration and concern swirling through him. Marco had begun to step into an uncharted territory where their resolve could either anchor them or drown them in the chaos they were courting. The bar owner's demeanor subtly shifted, his interest quieting over a flickering flame of ambition. "Let's see how well you navigate before I toss you to the wolves. You might just swim, at least for a little while." Exhilaration and dread twined together in Tommy's chest. The thrill of the chase was intoxicating. Yet that exhilaration came with an undeniable undercurrent of uncharted danger. He could hear the echo of their decisions bouncing off the walls of the bar, reflecting back their ambition and untested promises. As the conversation deepened, the evening spiraled toward a pivotal moment. They were no longer just fringe participants in an underground conflict. They were positioning themselves as players actively seeking control. But with power came responsibility. The burden of their choices weighed heavily on him. Are you ready to make real enemies? Act with conviction? Trust frail alliances? The bar owner pressed, probing deeply into their motivations. Tommy met the bar owner's scrutinizing gaze, the heat of decision crackling in the air like static. With every heartbeat, he recognized that they could no longer shield themselves behind youthful naivety. They were stepping into a storm, and their resolve would dictate the strength of their sails. "We're all in," Tommy replied firmly, his voice unwavering. The decision felt monumental, each word steeped in the potential for collateral damage, relationships shattered, and irrevocable pathways forged. As they exited the bar, a shiver raced down Tommy's spine, a potent mixture of anxiety and excitement wrapping around him. They were entwined in this dangerous web now. There was no going back. The night seemed charged, holding promises and threats in equal measure. "Do you think we can really do this?" Marco asked, his voice still edged with hopeful disbelief. "Honestly, I don't know," Tommy breathed out, the quiet confession sending a ripple through his thoughts. "But we're already in the deep end. What other choice do we have?" The weight of their choices echoed between them as they stepped into the cool night air, the thrill of the unknown looming over their shoulders. Each step felt heavier, wrapped in determination, but tinged with the anxiety of navigating treachery in a world that had already begun to sink its claws into their lives. But what they didn't know was that their paths would soon cross with forces that would irrevocably alter their destinies. The shadows loomed larger, and their decisions would soon lead them to a confrontation that would test their loyalty and resolve in ways they had yet to fathom. Time passed, and with it came the drastic changes that reshaped Tommy's existence. The new world they chose to immerse themselves in soon became riddled with the chaos of crime, manipulation, and the constant threat of violence. However, thrust into the storm, Tommy transformed from the insecure boy who once felt invisible into a formidable player, commanding respect and asserting his newfound identity with confidence. Months later, as the sun dipped behind the gritty skyline of Newark, Tommy sat across from Marco at their usual table in the bar. The bronze glow from the overhead lights cast warm shadows on their faces, and the tension that once defined their conversations was replaced by an air of determination. "This is it," Tommy declared, a steely resolve lining his voice. "We've gathered intel, built alliances, we know where the shipment goes down tonight. This is our moment." Marco leaned back, the weight of their journey reflected in his expression. "You've come so far, man, but it's not just about the shipment, it's about what comes next." Tommy nodded. The gravity of every decision intertwined their fates. He had taken control not only of their path, but of his own sense of self. The boy who craved acceptance transformed into a young man demanding to be heard. As they moved towards their destination, Tommy's steps were steady, grounding each assertive breath. He recalled the shame from his school days, the boys who once taunted him for being weak, and he smiled softly, recognizing the strength he'd cultivated from those very trials. He was no longer a ghost lost in a house of mirrors. He was a leader, equipped with knowledge, strategy, and a broader purpose. Tonight marked the culmination of their journey, the moment to confront the leader of the syndicate, the ultimate decision-maker they had secretly tracked for weeks. Tommy understood that their actions would ripple across this precarious network of power. What began as a quest for self-preservation and protection had evolved into a mission about integrity, making the world a safer place for those they cared about. Arriving at the warehouse, Tommy felt a jolt of adrenaline surge through him. The atmosphere buzzed with tension-heavy anticipation. They positioned themselves strategically, having anticipated how the night would unfold. The meticulously plotted plan revealed both courage and calculated pragmatism as they prepared to confront their opponents and demand a ceasefire on the chaos. A figure materialized from the darkness, an imposing silhouette with eyes hard as stone. The syndicate leader regarded them with curiosity and an unmistakable hint of disdain. "You've got guts showing up here, kids. What makes you think you can play in this league?" "You underestimated us," Tommy responded firmly, his tone resonating with confidence. "We've been gathering information, watching how you operate, and we're here to take control of the narrative. The chaos you perpetuate stops here." His words hung in the air, the weight of truth anchoring his stance. Tommy no longer felt the quiver of fear. Instead, he confronted this moment, a confrontation that delineated who he had become from the boy he once was. The leader sneered, but behind that facade, apprehension edged into his demeanor. Tommy continued, using the knowledge they'd collected. "You've caused enough damage, and we're prepared to expose your interests if necessary. We know where your shipments go and who's in on it. We're not afraid to blow the lid off this operation." Marco joined in, voice unwavering. "You can either choose to navigate a safer path forward or be thrust into a war you cannot win. Your choice." There was a pause, a marked shift in the balance of power as the two boys stood resolute, daring the man before them to respond. In that moment, Tommy could feel the thrill of transformation coursing through his veins. This was the embodiment of his newfound identity, an advocate for change, a protector of those who couldn't protect themselves, and someone who demanded the respect he always yearned for. The tension crackled, but as the leader assessed his options, the tide turned. He was cornered, the walls of deception closing in, and with a begrudging nod, he relented. "All right, let's negotiate, but know this. There will always be someone waiting in the shadows." Tommy felt an overwhelming rush of triumph as they secured a temporary peace, acknowledging the hard-fought victory that lay before them. This was the result of countless nights spent deciphering clues, nights where determination overshadowed fear. As he walked out of the warehouse with Marco at his side, the salt-stained air of autumn kissed their faces, and a profound transformation washed over him. Not only had Tommy confronted the dark underbelly of their reality, but he had emerged with a confidence that cemented his competence. "I can't believe we did it," Marco exhaled, awe coloring his voice. "You've become a force to reckon with." Tommy smiled genuinely, feeling a sense of fulfillment wrapped around his heart. "We did it. Together. I never would have imagined this journey would lead me to become someone worth recognizing." With the shadows of their past behind them and the promise of a safer path ahead, Tommy felt a surge of ownership over his life. He knew that they would continue navigating uncharted waters, but with their experience, they now wielded power and strength. The very futures they shouldered were no longer dictated by fear, they were defined by courage and resilience. As they stepped into the night, ready to leave their mark on the world, it became clear that fulfillment lay within the individual choices they made, that the essence of transformation was not merely in overcoming the darkness, but in forging a new path illuminated by tenacity and authentic growth. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support really matters. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.